Anderson 2 families, this is Superintendent Jason Johns, and you're about to watch a presentation from last night's board meeting, November the 10th, presenting a facility study on both of our middle schools. If you remember, back in the winter, we held 4 town hall meetings and several meetings in our schools, sharing with our community some of the facility needs that we have with our 2 middle schools. The feedback that we got from our community was a desire to see a comprehensive and itemized report with the associated costs for each project that we need to do to remodel and replace systems in those 2 schools so that our students can still attend those facilities. And that's the presentation that you're about to watch at this time. We're cutting this out of the larger board meeting for your convenience, and as always, thank you for your support.
Item for the superintendent's report is a presentation by McMillan, Paston, Smith, and then Triangle Construction. This presentation is a result of about 6 months of work just for our community's edification. If they remember, in March, our board approved for a third party to do a full facility audit for both of our middle schools. This was a result of 4 town hall meetings and 4 meetings at our school, and we asked for our community's input. And that input was consistently and comprehensively to go out and get a full facility audit complete with estimated costs for all of the projects in the middle schools in order to bring those up so that we can continue to have usable life. And so this is providing the information to our community that they asked for. So Michelle Smith of McMillan, Paston, Smith will start off and explain the process of this facility audit, and then Will Trammell will provide the cost estimates for each of those, for the line item and for each of the middle schools as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that introduction. Again, my name is Michelle Smith. I'm with McMillan, Paston, Smith Architecture, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with Anderson School District 2 on the audit of your middle schools. Just to take you through, let's see if I can control from over here. Oh, yeah, great. Just to touch on the process that we went through to review your middle schools, Belton Middle School and Honea Path. We took our team into the field. We physically walked both schools pretty comprehensively. We did it twice, one with the lens of looking at the educational adequacy of the facilities, and then the second really focusing on the physical conditions and the physical deficiencies that were present at both facilities. So just tonight, I just want to take you through a little bit of our findings, our process, and our findings, which lead to the cost analysis by our Triangle partners. So the in-field review, really, we looked at every single space that we could, inside and outside of the buildings. We went into every space. We looked from ceiling, walls, to flooring, and we marked deficiencies in a methodical way on a plan. We do this because if there are future projects that are planned from our analysis and our findings, then we can more accurately project the quantity and the scope for those projects. So that's why it's really important for us to capture not only the deficiency, but its location in the building. We rate every single deficiency that we find. So from a scoring standpoint, and I apologize that this is a little bit fuzzy, we rate our findings from 5 to 1. So 5 is an excellent rating. If the use or the building condition of that component is like new or brand new, it gets a 5. No issues are associated with it. A rating of 4 means that component is good, no issues to report, no expected failures. We want to reevaluate that component in, say, 5 years, 3 to 5 years. If a score is fair, that's a 3. That's average condition. There is some wear. It's not new, but it still functions fairly well for its use and capacity. We may need to replace or improve that condition in anywhere between 3 and 6 years. A rating of 2 indicates this component or use is in poor condition. It's worn from its use and it's nearing the end of its life cycle. Consider replacing or improving within 2 to 3 years. And a rating of 1 is something, a building component or an issue that is in critical condition. It wants to be addressed immediately or as soon as possible within a year. So just to give you an idea of how we scored the deficiencies. It's important for us to be able to quantify the scoring in order just to give you all an overall snapshot of what we believe are the conditions of your facilities. So starting with Belton Middle School, Belton, we identified 495 instances of conditions that we felt were important to address and capture. You can see that most of the, Belton Middle School's in decent shape. Most of the scoring fell within the 4, 3, or 2 categories. There was even an instance of a 5, which is great, and just a small percentage of 1s, so which is great. And then you can see that we also define the categories for these deficiencies, so they are either pertaining to the site, issues related to the overall site of the campus, and that can mean parking lot issues or conditions, driveway, vehicular drop-offs, the conditions such as those, and also playfields as well. BE is building envelope, so that has to do with the physical roof and the exterior enclosure of the building. Obviously, keeping water out is paramount to keeping a building healthy, so that's what we really evaluate when we look at the building envelope. We also look at the interior of the spaces, the ceiling finishes, the wall finishes, the flooring finishes. We take into account the environment as well, so that explains the interior category. MEP stands for mechanical and electrical and plumbing building components. After our initial walkthrough, our engineering team, including structural, did walk each one of these facilities and came up with their scoring, which is reflected in this report. And then lastly, health, safety, and security. We isolate those components that are really capturing exactly what that sounds like: the security of the campus and the school, the safety, anything life safety related that would affect the safety of the students. Usually this is like fire alarm, all of our code related building information, and accessibility, ADA requirements. So we capture those evaluations in that HSS category as well. So still staying with Belton Middle, the second filter that we reviewed these schools in was educational adequacy. And we don't often get to do this with this kind of filter, but because we were asked to really think about the use of the spaces, we wanted to think about how your existing spaces would compare to current educational design. You can see that, as you know, most of these, your 2 schools were originally portions of built in the 50s. So it's thinking about how their spaces are being used, if they're being used to the optimum standard of 21st century educational design now. With Belton Middle School, we did cite 86 instances that were noteworthy, and most of these scored a 3 or a 2. And you can see that most of those instances were related to use. And that really is what we see as we work in existing schools and design new schools. The educational needs and visions of schools and districts change over time. So that use area is really the one that's most challenged. Moving on to Honea Path Middle School. From, again, the 2 lenses we reviewed these schools, physical conditions was the first. We captured 370 instances, very similar to Belton. Most of that scored in the 4, 3, or 2 category. There were a handful of items that were 1 that need to be addressed sooner if possible. And then, again, the breakdown by physical conditions category: site, building, envelope, interior, MEP, and HSS. And for both of these schools, you can see that the highest percentage of deficiencies fall within that interiors or building envelope category. From the educational adequacy standpoint, Honea Path ranked or rated very similarly to Belton, where most of the scoring was in the 3 or the 2 category for educational adequacy. And again, it's really related to use. What we really see is that what we really, I think, captured, and we'll probably get into more detail about this, is that, some of the spaces seemed smaller than ideal. Some of the special classrooms may be lacking some acoustical treatments that are recommended. It's those kinds of things that we would have captured in this educational adequacy report. So when you compare the 2 schools side by side, you can see that they're both fairly tracking similarly. They are both in that 2 to 3 category where they're just worn from use. They need a refresh and some improvements, and that it's up to you all to decide how to tackle those. So with Belton Middle, I'm just going a little bit more specifically. These were the scores. These were the scores that we collected. So you can see how the overall score of 2.89 is affected by each one of those physical conditions categories. So for sight, it had an overall score of 3.31. Here, a lot of the parking lot paving was failing. We understood that the drop-off vehicular access is a challenge at this particular school, so we wanted to capture that. And then there's we had a note about the existing field, which is lit, which is great, just might need more seating for events. We also captured some notes on building envelope and the interior. In terms of the building envelope, a lot of the windows were failing and needing to be addressed. So that was a big component to keeping water out and to not having moisture issues in the building. So we wanted to capture that. There were some comments about the interiors feeling a little wet or moist. And then there were some issues with the kitchen as well that we captured. The mechanical, electrical, and plumbing scored a 2.8, and then overall the health, safety, and security scored a 3.63. From an educational adequacy standpoint, again, the score that you see is a 2.19. The school itself is really actually in great shape. You all are taking care of your facilities. The critical factors that we identified in terms of educational adequacy are, this sounds minor, but there's not enough faculty restrooms. The media center layout is a little awkward. There aren't any hoods in the science labs, and ideally the science labs are smaller than they should be. There's not enough room for life skills training. The front area administration is kind of small. There's no waiting area. And then the school would also love to have some breakout spaces for students. So those were just some items that can be captured, in the full executive report. If I move on, I'm still here in Belton. So just capturing the site to remind everyone of the conditions of the site and how the school has evolved over time. We have a graphic capturing the ages of the school, which is helpful to us in terms of understanding their building construction and how they may be modified in the future. Knowing what era they're built in is helpful for that. And then again, there have been improvements made over time. The corridors are bright and direct. The entry is welcoming. And then some typical classroom shots. These were taken over the summer break, so all the furniture was well put away so that the floor could be taken care of, which is certainly appreciated. Some nice collaboration space, which has been inserted over time. And then the gymnasium, cafeteria, media center. Okay, and then some exterior shots as well. And then the main play area for the middle school students. Okay, and then moving on to Honea Path. Honea Path is similar, scored similarly. You can see the overall roll-up physical condition score is a 2.67, with the site at 3.5 contributing to that. The building envelope here also in the interior rated between 2.5 and or about 2.5. There were some issues with the building envelope where the masonry seemed to just be there may be conditions that need to be addressed with some of the masonry walls. In terms of the interior, I'll get to this with educational adequacy, but there's several interior classrooms in this particular building. The mechanical, electrical, plumbing scored a 2.3, and health, safety, security was right at 3. So from an educational adequacy standpoint, Honea Path did score a 2.32. Our biggest notable features in terms of the use of spaces at the school, where that exterior classroom, or the classrooms don't have a ton of exterior daylight. They have limited daylight windows. Several classrooms are interior only. We noticed that the life skills classroom and special ed is separate from other academic areas, which may not necessarily be ideal. Sometimes these students want to be more integrated, if possible, with the rest of the student population. There was a need for professional development space, more conference room space, and generally the interiors of the building feels a little maze-like. And not as clear in terms of circulation. So those were some observations we made about Honea Path. The challenge here is that this school has grown and expanded over time in a town, and it's surrounded by great neighbors. But the play area being across the street and down the block, just means that operationally the school has to take real care and work with the neighborhood side by side to ensure that the students remain safe as they traverse between the school building and their play area, as well as circulation. We understand that site circulation, parent drop-off is a major challenge at this school. So again, Honea Path has been added on to, portions rebuilt over its history. We know that the entry was improved many years ago, but still a little unclear because it's like right next to this main corridor. And then here's a photo of a typical classroom. This is one that does have an exterior door access, so that's an example of one of the classrooms that has exterior lighting. Here's another classroom. This was a space that was repurposed to be a part of a conference room for professional development, and then the rest of the space blocked off behind this screen, we believe is for supplies, storage and supplies. Gymnasium, cafeteria, part of their media center with their skylight above, and then some exterior and site photos as well. So that is my summary. That is the summary that we collected from the audit. From all of the findings, we worked with district leadership to identify a set of scope items that Triangle has priced, and I'll let Will go through that with you all now. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for having us. Oh, thank you. Thank you for having us. So, like Michelle said, we've met with them over the last 6 months several times. We've walked the facilities. Our task for you guys was to provide as accurate as we can what we think it would cost to renovate the school to give you a facility that would last another 40 years. Now, obviously, we don't have construction documents yet. We have a report showing the facility. We have some ideas from the design team, from your team, about what the renovation will look like. But ultimately, it was our responsibility to walk through the facility, take the report, and kind of put together the scope of work of what we see the project looking like to accomplish your needs. So because of the flexibility in the scope, we decided it would be best to provide you a range of costs. When you look at this, the high estimate is, taking it to as far as we think you can go based on the report from Michelle's team to give you everything that she's addressed. The low estimate is simply us going through the budget and pulling things out, saying, well, you don't really have to do that. But those are decisions y'all would make with the design team and us along the way if you progress with the renovation. So as we go through this, just keep in mind that somewhere in the middle is where you'll land on the scope of work, but this is very much high level at this point. These are all based on current cost data. If you start the project, if the ball keeps rolling, you start something the next year or two, we would say these numbers are good. If you table it for 5 years, you need to adjust for inflation, and we can certainly help with that. Something to remember with renovations, you're always going to run into the domino effect. For instance, when you get into the site work, you're going to have to address car stacking lanes with DOT. When you do that kind of thing and you start building roads, you're going to run into storm drain issues, which lead to the size of the storm pond. You're going to run into utilities that need to be relocated. So that's going to hit. We've tried to address all those things in these budgets to anticipate what you might run into. Similar with plumbing in the building. If you have old pipes in the floor that need to come out and be replaced, well, you have to cut the concrete up. You have to replace the floor. Again, just that domino. Now, there's certainly some areas of the building that when you get into the construction documents, you might not have to touch those 2 rooms. You might just have to do a fresh coat of paint. It's just hard to identify those things right now. So, again, that's the purpose for the range. We've attempted to allow for enough overhead on site to allow for some phasing. We've allowed for some costs with portable buildings, assuming you have to move some classrooms back out and back in. That's something that comes along with renovations. We've also allowed for some new construction aspects. This isn't for new classrooms. This is mainly for things like security upgrades, vestibules. They're just various needs that came to light in the architect's report. So we'll scroll down. So the first page shows Belton Middle School, low and high. And again, this is broken down into, in construction world, we use 16 divisions of construction, 1 through 16, 2 being site work, 3 concrete, masonry, all the way down. So the cost here, you walk into the building, you see brand new casework, fresh paint, new flooring, new ceilings, again, with the intent for that high estimate to be a brand new facility. And then the low estimate is just kind of that's us telling you we would suggest not going below that number when you're planning for what it might cost. So much of the scope of the work at this point between the 2 schools is the same. They're similar in age. They both have similar needs. There's a few different nuances between the 2 that make them different. But a lot of the work would look the same. New windows, roof, all those things are being addressed in these numbers. And of course, we have contingencies on these numbers to allow for things we might not have thought of at this point. Get down to the bottom, we've totaled everything up. So owner soft costs are the costs that y'all will incur separately from construction. These are generally defined as costs that aren't fixed to the building, so your design fees, all your third-party testing, those kind of things. And again, a contingency at the bottom with your total budget, high and low. Questions can we answer?
What questions do we have, trustees, for Will and Charlie and Michelle?
On Belton Middle, does that include a new band room and a new area there?
I believe on the high estimate, we did allow for that.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask both of y'all to respond if you could, because y'all either design or build every day and we don't. although a couple of us were in the school business 30-something years. But you've seen a lot of buildings. You've seen ours several times. So when you consider mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and structural issues that you saw in our two middle schools, would you recommend renovating or would you recommend building new, considering the cost that we see here?
So we did give that some thought. Some things for y'all to consider when you're going through that question. One is the energy expense. You know, even though we say with the high estimate we're going to give you a quote brand new building, it's still an old building. You know, we're not tearing down the exterior walls, which is where, you know, that's where a lot of your energy happens. You know, we can replace the roof, replace the windows and the doors, but if you're going to tear down the walls, you might as well tear it down and start over. So there's energy consumption. That obviously with a brand new facility, you can control that 100%, and you get a better envelope with a brand new building. You get more flexibility with the design with a new building versus renovating, and you can plan for your growth with the new. But again, my job here was to present this cost information between the two and, you know, try to answer some of these questions. But Michelle, what
Sure.
would you add
Well,
to that?
And I know y'all have asked me before, and I've answered this before. It's very hard to answer this question because we work both in designing new structures and renovating existing ones, existing assets. What we want to do is understand and help you all make the best decision for you and your community. Truly, when I think about how, you know, Will brought up a great point about embodied energy of the building. Like, you will still have two buildings that you will maintain after this $43 to $57 million injection into two buildings. Those energy bills that Ms. Parnell brought up previously, they may not get that much better because you're dealing with existing buildings, existing utilities. With a newer building, we can install more energy efficient lighting. You know, the packages, the HVAC packages that they design nowadays with a much tighter building envelope that we can design are much more energy efficient. So thinking, you know, about in the future, the utility bills for a new building will likely be less than the utility bills for two buildings moving forward. That's what I'd like to think about. Facilities and maintenance costs with those, right? Maintaining two roofs versus maintaining one roof. That actually your roof footprint might be a little smaller with a new building because it might be more consolidated. It might be, you know, a two-story wing, meaning you have less square footage with one-story and one-story roof over it. So I think you need to think about it from that regard, from that aspect. I also have been thinking, because I see this, about the impact that it will have on your students and your teachers when the work is done on the existing campus. I truly think that it could be, even if we went full bore and made as many improvements to each existing school as possible, we'll likely, the schools will be living through a 24 to 28 month construction timeline. And that's, you need to think about, it's important to think about the disruption to that. And anything can be done to the full extent and without minimizing that impact on students. But I think about that, and thinking about keeping students safe, ensuring that the teaching environment is as least affected as possible. So when I think about if you had the opportunity to build a new school elsewhere, just think that, education, the learning environment would be minimally disrupted by the construction of this other school that would take less time to build than 24 to 28 months. It might take 16 to 18 months to build. You're not having to swing students out and swing them back in, after 6 to 12 months. You're not having to inconvenience your families in terms of drop off and pick up, and not having events at the school, maybe having to move them to the high school because we're renovating or working right next to the existing gymnasium. So I think forward to the construction possibilities too, and how it would affect the daily lives of students and teachers.
Okay, go ahead, Kurt.
All right, I'm going to pick on Charlie, because we had a little bit of a discussion before pertaining to when you're trying to quantify, you've mentioned renovation possibly being a 40-year fix or whatever, the building. I think that's being a little bit disingenuous, because you can guarantee work on our plumbing, electrical, some mechanical or whatever. But Charlie and I had a discussion where when you're talking about the entire envelope, you can't guarantee that. You give us 40 years versus 50 years on a new building. Charlie explained that to me earlier. I'm going to put you on the hot seat. Can you expand on what they've stated, please?
Sure. No matter what you do, at the end of the day, you're still going to be left with the bones of a building that's, in some cases, greater than 50 years old on some of these campuses. So, and Philip's not here tonight, but we've had a lot of discussions with him in terms of just ongoing maintenance and energy costs. We highlighted that a little bit earlier. With a new building, you can guarantee your maintenance costs to a certain extent and what you're going to expect out of that. In an old building, and William had that up there as well with the contingencies. There's going to be some unforeseens that you go in there and you just don't know. Once we start opening up walls to replace plumbing and electrical, that we very well could find some structural issues. We don't see those now. None of that showed up in any of these reports, but that could exist there. And there's just a lot of unforeseens when you get into that. The other thing that we are worried about, and it's not something you can answer right now with not going in depth, but fixing your car line, once you touch these buildings and start renovating them, you're going to have to bring everything up to code. DOT is going to require a lot when you do that. William kind of talked on a little bit about with your stormwater and those aspects. Your car line's going to get a lot longer. It's not adequate now. That's not a surprise to anybody in the community. I don't know if you have room at Honea Path to do that. I think you might have a little bit of room, although it's not in the right spot at Belton. I really think you're going to struggle to be able to bring that all the way up to code and what DOT wants. I don't know that. I'm not a civil engineer. That would require a much more in-depth. So there's a couple, we're just listing off several that we talked about before that keep popping up when you're talking about trying to renovate a building that has served the community great for the past 50 plus years, but do you keep putting that money in there, or do you take that opportunity to build something?
I think you hit on this earlier. This is no plans for growth, correct?
Yeah, this really doesn't address classrooms.
Correct. And I was in contact with one of the board members on the Anderson Planning Commission. And I just got it during the board meeting, so I apologize for looking at my phone a while. But right now, from March 31st of last year to present, there are 48 building permits for new dwellings in District 2. And that's not counting the developments that we know that have been approved that could be a lot more, but 48, that's going to pressure us a lot to keep the buildings. So my other question is, if we renovate and don't build, where are we going to add on? Do you have any suggestions?
So that is a complicated question because I know that our structural engineer found in his report that while especially at Honea Path, the existing CMU masonry walls were in good structural sound shape, they would not be recommended to go vertically, meaning it's not recommended to add on to those footprints. So if adding on anywhere between 6 and 10 classrooms is desired, in rough numbers, that would be anywhere between 150 to 250 students. If it was determined that that type of addition needed to happen, we would need to look a little more surgically, if you will, at making a modification to the existing building, meaning proposing to demolish a portion of building and build potentially a 2-story addition onto the building. So replacing more of the asset versus just renovating. That makes sense?
Makes sense. Which would mean more disruption, more portables for a longer period of time.
Correct. And that, that cost, quite honestly, isn't captured. The high range of cost captured renovating an existing portion of building, keeping it at the existing configuration, so 1 story. But if we needed to review, demolishing, say 20,000 square feet of building and building a new wing, that, I would want to maybe assume like the new construction numbers for that type of cost,
I've got one, Michelle, for you. You mentioned the adequacy of the classrooms. We're going to have a lot of people looking at this after the meeting. Can you explain a little bit what new schools, what their classroom layouts and structure look like?
Sure. Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I would have to say that, I don't want to be critical or say anything that detracts from the report card rating that Mr. Johns just presented, because it's great. I mean, you guys have a great, wonderful community that supports your schools and your students and teachers. So what we see in terms of 21st century learning is we see more flexible classrooms and collaboration spaces, really. So instead of designing a typical double-loaded corridor. We call it a double-loaded corridor. That's what y'all have. It's a corridor with 2 classrooms, or classrooms on either side, and classrooms of the same size. We would actually design a cluster of rooms that have various sizes. So a classroom could be anywhere between 8 and 1,000 square feet for a typical size. There may be a group room or a conference room, a large group room that might be 400 square feet, and a small group room that might be 200 square feet that's associated with those classrooms, so that teachers have the flexibility to create breakout rooms for their classes if they need to adjust. Learning doesn't happen just one way anymore, right? It's a fused type of learning, and I think a lot teachers need collaboration spaces as well. So some of those small group rooms or 400 square foot rooms could also function as collaboration rooms for teachers if they're not being used specifically for instruction. So it's really just giving you all more flexibility in various room sizes that can better accommodate the evolving teacher curriculum.
Okay.
What I like to think about when I work with districts who are envisioning their spaces, I encourage them to think about how students are going to be learning in 10 years. How are they going to be learning? We can't be thinking about how we teach today. We need to be thinking about how students learn 5 to 10 years from now. Electronics, iPads, Chromebooks have, incredibly, the internet and AI is changing everything from year to year. And it's not only changing how students learn, it's changing how teachers teach in response to how students need to learn.
Thank you.
Could you tell me, in the districts y'all work with, how many are in our boat with 2 old buildings? Like, for example, in Greenville, when I worked there, we didn't have a building occupied that was over 50 years old. Is that the norm that you're seeing? Or is there districts with very old buildings still being utilized that y'all work with?
I mean, we're working with several different districts in the upstate, and it's a mixture.
Okay.
I mean, we're renovating some buildings that are not quite this old, but, you know, maybe a 10, 15 years newer that are being renovated, that they, for different, I mean, there are always different cases. For those cases, they have the room to renovate. In some cases, it makes sense for them. A lot of new construction going on, a lot of new school. Obviously, we're all experiencing the growth. I know we all live in upstate, and I know Michelle's seeing it down in Charleston. The whole state's seeing it. So a lot of new growth, a lot of new schools. Most of the new schools we're building are replacing old schools that have been, you know, their useful life is done.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Michelle, Charlie, Will, thank y'all so much for coming in
Thank y'all very much. Safe travels.
today.